Man believes QAnon is real. Kills Mafia boss. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Obvious, bringing you the obvious, and today on the New York Times. So, this is probably one of the most insane headlines that I've ever seen in my life. And I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised that this is actually not what you might be expecting. So here it says, he wasn't seeking to kill a mob boss. He was trying to help Trump, his lawyer says. In new court documents, the lawyer for Anthony Comello says he became obsessed by right-wing QAnon conspiracy theories. Now, why is this story insane, and who is QAnon? Well, my friends, that's a rabbit hole we're about to jump into. So, a long time ago, even before the election started, there were some weird posts on Hacker 4chan on Pol's politically incorrect board. QAnon's posts would usually contain gibberish, pointless words and questions. Here's an example from 2017. Mockingbird. HRC detained, not arrested yet. Where is Huma? Follow Huma. This has nothing to do with Russia, yet. What does POTUS surround himself with generals? What is military intelligence? Mockingbird 10.30.17. And so on and so forth. Now, as you can see, most QAnon posts are absolute gibberish and vagueness. I recognize this technique from fortune telling. Basically, all of these words are meaningless. They're questions, they're vague statements, they don't mean anything, just like in fortune telling. I'll give you an example. Let's say you go to a fortune teller and they want to convince you that they're psychic. They know the truth, much like QAnon does in his posts. Well, you could simply say a vague statement and let people's brains fill in the blanks. After all, the human brain is a rationalization engine. It is built to fill in the blanks. More often than not, it makes mistakes. So, you go to a fortune teller and they tell you, oh, I see that sometimes you are cautious about new experiences. Now, this is a vague statement and it can pretty much apply to anyone. But here's the real kicker. The next thing they say is, but sometimes you find courage in your heart and you are brave and you go out and tackle those new experiences head on. And you're like, wow, that really does seem to fit me. I am sometimes brave. But here's the kicker. If you pay attention, you just stated two opposites in one. Sometimes you're cowardly, sometimes you're brave. You've stated both possibilities. In other words, it must be true. And that's how it works. You see, with QAnon's posts, it's just a bunch of gibberish, asking questions, and people can assume, there's something here, there must be some sort of pattern. But really, there is no pattern. You see, I'm going to reveal a very simple truth. I strongly believe that QAnon is a LARP. LARP, noun, a type of interactive role-playing game in which the participants portray characters through physical action, often in costume and through props. In other words, LARPs are make-believe. A long time ago on Poll, I noticed that QAnon posts would come up, and I immediately recognized it as gibberish. That sort of vague fortune-telling. Basically, bullcrap. In other words, I have no reason to believe that QAnon is real. I believe that it's all nonsense, and it's a small cult, very popular among boomers who simply don't know any better. In other words, QAnon is nonsense. It doesn't exist. It's a LARP. It's fake. It's pretend. It's a cult. And before going on and reading the article, I believe it's very important that we establish this. QAnon is a LARP. So anything you see here, like on Wikipedia, is all bullcrap. It's all nonsense because Q's not real, but they're going to pretend like it is. Now, let's check this out. Now, before we really get into this, just a reminder, you can join me on websites for as low as $1. Doing so will get you access to Fight Club, a private Discord server. There's also PayPal options if you want to donate that way. For those of you interested in physical products, may I suggest visiting swagnets.com, my affiliate, to which you can find a link in the description. They currently sell these handy little MacBook Pro covers. They're magnetic, they stick right to the screen, and they can cover your camera whenever needed. They're very stylish, so you can see it on the side. And they even have a meme version called the NyanCat. Be sure to check it out. Also be sure to check out my social media links. Be sure to follow me on BitChute. You never know if we're gonna be censored these days. So let's look here. This article's by Ali Watkins. As his pickup truck reared toward the Tot Hill section of Staten Island, Anthony Comello had no intention of killing a mob boss. He wanted only to arrest him, his lawyer said in new court documents. Now here's the thing. Here's what gets me. Even though he believed a LARP like the QAnon LARP, he actually killed a mafia boss. organized crime family, and he got arrested? He should be rewarded for killing a mob boss. What kind of backwards country do we live in when we punish citizens for taking out criminals? The details of what happened next are well known. Mr. Camelo, 24, arrived at the home of Francisco Frankie Boy Cali, a leader in the Gambino crime family, and lured him outside. The men spoke briefly. Then prosecutors say Mr. Camelo pulled out a gun from his car and shot Mr. Cali, leaving him to die in the street. What the heck? Taking out the trash is what I call it. Seriously, he killed a crime leader. Why is he being charged? That's a public service. That's how backwards we live. That's how backwards society is. You can take out a criminal, a literal crime boss, and you get punished. Why didn't the police take him out? Why didn't the police arrest him? I have so many questions. This story is insane. Mr. Camelo, an aimless young man who lived with his parents on Staten Island, were arrested 3 days later and charged with murder. The court documents filed on Friday offer a glimpse into the deeply troubled mind of Mr. Camelo, who his defense lawyer says was so deluded by internet conspiracy theories that he was determined to conduct a citizen's arrest of Mr. Cali and turn the Mafia leader over to the military. Now, what's really crazy about this, like on multiple levels, is one, QAnon usually, like, it's really vague, and it usually talks about the deep state. It doesn't really name any names. There's really no connection here. Like, why? There are no theories. Like, first of all, QAnon posts are all nonsense. It's kind of like senile, which you can tell because a lot of boomers partake in it and they actually buy into it, even though it's meaningless, because their minds are a little bit softer due to their age. You know, that's not true of every boomer, but it's ridiculous. There was no theory to follow. There were no breadcrumbs. There's nothing there. It's a LARP. It's randomness. This guy is probably has a mental illness, is my guess. He ardently believed that Francisco Cali, a boss in the Gambino crime family, was a prominent member of the deep state and accordingly an appropriate target for a citizen's arrest, wrote Mr. Camelo's lawyer, Robert C. Gottlieb. At times, the circumstances of Mr. Cali's demise have seemed so outlandish that they appeared specially designed for these viral times. But a clear picture is emerging of how the tale's incongruous pieces, a mob boss, a drifter from Staten Island, and a right-wing conspiracy theory may fit together. Do you know how insane this is? A random citizen who lived at home with his parents literally took out a mob boss like it was nothing. This dude needs to be hired by the CIA. Okay, so Mr. Cali's murder was the highest profile mob killing in decades, an event so significant that in the days between Mr. Cali's death and Mr. Camelo's arrest, speculation surged that a new war was brewing among New York's 5 mafia families. And you know, it's freaking amazing that there's literally living mafia families that commit crimes, and none of them are in jail. So who's the real criminal here? Is it this man who fell for some stupid conspiracy online? Or is it the police in New York who literally let the mafia bosses just live free? Wow. Now don't get me wrong. I would love to join a mafia family. I would love to be a mafia boss. I can't think of anything more cool. Of course, I'm a law-abiding citizen and, well, that's just a pipe dream. But seriously, what kind of world are we living in? We live in a society. The reality, according to his lawyer, appears to be even more bizarre. Mr. Camelo had become convinced that Mr. Cali was part of the so-called deep state, a cabal of criminals that conspiracy theorists claim controls the United States government. It's not a conspiracy, okay. Whatever you call the deep state or the dark government, the shadow government, that's a popular name, it exists. It always exists. Because there are always people in the government pulling strings, moving money, and being corrupt. Okay, we're not children anymore. You can't lie to the American people. The shadow government does exist. And I'm not going to call them the deep state because that's a media name. I call them the shadow government. They exist. They always exist. Every country has one. Mr. Camelo also believed he was a chosen vigilante of President Trump. Mr. Camelo became certain that he was enjoying the protection of President Trump himself and that he had the president's full support, Mr. Gottlieb wrote. So it's obvious that his lawyer is going for insanity. And I gotta be honest, this person might actually be insane. That delusion will be part of a package of evidence that Mr. Gottlieb says he plans to submit to the court to prove that Mr. Camelo is not guilty by reason of mental defect. Mr. Gottlieb is seeking to have the court place Mr. Camelo in psychiatric treatment. So as I predicted, literally a paragraph ago, he's going for insanity. Rather than prosecute him on murder charges, Mr. Camelo is being held in protective custody as he awaits trial. I agree. This dude is clearly not mentally there, and frankly, he killed a mob boss, so, you know, I don't know how bad we're supposed to think that is. But unfortunately, since the mainstream is left-wing and they assume that QAnon is right-wing, even though it's really just some nonsensical cult, they're probably going to put him in jail for life. Mr. Camelo took handcuffs with him to Tot Hill on March 13th, Mr. Gottlieb said, but his plan was foiled when Mr. Cali refused to submit to a citizen's arrest. Instead, Mr. Gottlieb said, the Gambino leader reached towards his waistband. Fearing for his life, Mr. Camelo shot Mr. Cali 10 times and fled. Mr. Gottlieb said, the good old quintuple tap. QAnon, a baseless conspiracy theory that originated on internet message boards, played a key role in Mr. Camelo's descent into mental instability, his lawyer said. It claims, among other things, that America is controlled by a deep state, that prominent Democratic politicians are lollygaggers, and that John F. Kennedy Jr., who died in a 1999 plane crash, is secretly alive and will run for president in 2020. Okay, so I agree that QAnon is baseless, but the shadow government is not baseless. It is real. It exists. You'd be a moron to think otherwise. And Democratic politicians push degeneracy and abnormal stuff all the time. Okay, do I need to say Anthony Weiner? Huh? Oh, right. It couldn't possibly be true. At Mr. Camelo's first court appearance in March, he displayed symbols and phrases associated with QAnon scrawled on his hand in pen. He first began to take an interest in political conspiracy theories, Mr. Gottlieb said, in the weeks after Mr. Trump's 2016 election. How Mr. Camelo came to associate Mr. Cali or the Gambino crime family with such theories remains unclear. Typically, the conspiracy group targets Democratic political figures, not the Mafia, but Mr. Gottlieb said he believed Mr. Camelo had encountered posts online that suggested figures like Mr. Cali were also connected to the deep state. That's not even necessarily untrue. The reason these people aren't arrested is because they pay off the right people. Mr. Gottlieb said on Saturday that he was sifting through thousands and thousands of messages, posts, and forums that he said Mr. Camelo might have engaged with. The defense lawyer is also asking the judge to order prosecutors to provide details about anything found in Mr. Cali's home or car when they were searched after the shooting, including whether any weapons were found on or near Mr. Cali's body. So, this dude who lived with his parents, who doesn't even look like he's bad looking, and he looks fairly tall as well, fell for a LARP called QAnon, believed nonsense, and somehow this dude took out a mafia boss. Like, this is so legendary. I almost have to believe that this guy's a CIA agent, that they literally planted to take out this guy, and he's gonna go to jail, and then one day he's just gonna be killed in jail, except he won't be. He'll be extracted. Probably not, but I could see that being the case. This is insane. How do you go from a crazy conspiracy like QAnon, like a LARP, to that? I don't know, folks, but I just had to share the story with you because it's something else. The moral of the story is, do not buy into that juju, fortune-telling, cultist nonsense. QAnon is a LARP, but that's merely the obvious. Well, that's all for now, folks. What do you think about this story? Do you have any explanation of how this possibly could have happened? And what do you think about Q? Be sure to let me know. Just a reminder that because websites are no longer promoting red-pilled content, you can help me out by sharing videos. So it's a good way to show support. Post them anywhere you want. Red pill those normies. As always, thanks for watching. This has been Mr. Obvious, and I'll see you all next time.